She is also the author of the critically acclaimed book that we're discussing today, Mothering a Muslim. It was published in 2017 by Juggernaut Books and was named among the standout voices for 2018 by Telegraph and the Women Changemakers of 2018 by Midday. She has actively sought to give voice to anti-bullying campaigns and the cause of interfaith harmony. Her works find mention in the BBC, The Guardian, Le Monde, and The Washington Post, among other national and international media. So Nazia, thank you, like I said earlier, for joining us today and for writing this incredibly important and timely book.
Thank you for having me here, and good morning to everyone.
Thank you. So let's just get started. I mean, maybe I can begin by asking, I mean, is there anything you'd like to say before I pose my first question?
No, go ahead, let's get
Okay.
into it.
Okay, great. So I think, so the title of the book is Mothering a Muslim. And in this, I mean, like the blurb suggests, you look at sort of the treatment that kids, particularly ones that go to upper middle class schools in urban centers of India, receive at those schools, the kind of bullying and harassment they are subjected to, and of course the experience of parents in the process. But I wanted to know a little bit more from you about why this book. Why did you feel like this book was an important one to write? And I guess as you answer that, we learn more about the book as well.
Okay, thank you for throwing me into the deep end. Well, let me start from my own childhood. Growing up, I think we all would kind of, all the 80s kids, 90s kids would kind of uh, feel the familiarity in these stories that I found when I interviewed like 200 families across 12 states in India. And, stories from our own childhood were things like, okay, my favorite one, Asma from Bhopal. Okay. So Asma tells me that when she was in 6 years old, so now she's in her late 40s, so 40 years back. So 40 years back, when Asma was young in Bhopal, her family had shifted into a new neighborhood. So, and her parents were inside unpacking, and she was out in this little garden that area that they had. So, and a neighbor peeps in and starts having this conversation with us. A new kid on the block. He starts having, where are you guys from? What's happening? And suddenly he says, "Acha, tu Musalman ho?" And Asma is like, this little Asma is like offended. Okay, she's like offended, and she's like, "तुम होगे मुसलमान, मैं तो Asma हूँ." So that is something that it just felt such a familiar story that we growing up did not know these watertight compartments of religion, of who's Hindu, who's Muslim, and we just were very proud of our own identities. I could relate this to how I'm bringing up my own daughter, who knows about gods, and she knows how gods are called in different names by different friends of hers, or how she knows how to pray in the way that we pray. But it's okay to pray in different ways. So but she does not know that like what religion her best friend belongs to, or what religion her teacher belongs to. That is something that we have never discussed, and we don't find a reason to discuss that. So we just keep talking about diversity out there. Or the story from Mumbai, where Dr. Baris, her son, who's like in his early 40s now, so he must have been similarly 5 years old, 40 years back, and she tells me that they used to have a Maulana Sahab who would come over at the house every week and teach the Quran to the young boy. And along with the Quran, he would also to teach values like Musalman jhoot nahi bolte, Musalman ladai nahi karte, and other universal human values that we all are taught while we are growing up, beyond religion. So for this little child who grew up in a very secular household, he had never heard the word Musalman being used in his own house. So when the Maulana Sahib would use this, he assumed that the word Musalman meant these values. So once they had a guest over, and this little kid goes up to the guest and says, "Moti uncle, आपको पता है, मेरे क्लास में सब मुसलमान हैं, सारे मुसलमान हैं, बस वो अबरार नहीं है क्योंकि वो झगड़ा बहुत करता है, बाकी सब मुसलमान है." Again, a beautiful story that tells us how our kids grew up not really knowing that there are there are distinctions to be made based on religion between our own around the people around us. But when I went and spoke to so many families across the country to get a wide diversity in experiences, unfortunately, what I found was many of the experiences converging at one point. Uh, so this is where I start reading the book. So, for example, a story from today's time. Quite often, the battles start even earlier. My little one is 6.5 years old and got hit for being a Muslim in school, says Zareen, whose daughter Samaira studies in an internationally accredited school in Noida. A student sitting on the same bench as her asked, "Are you a Muslim?" He then started hitting Samaira, saying, "I hate Muslims." Zareen says it took a few days before her daughter could open up about it. I was appalled and shocked. I immediately called up the class teacher, who had a two-word response: "It happens." So we heard about how within a span of, say, 40 years, things have definitely changed in the lives of really young ones in schools. So such stories are the reason why I had to pick up this book and
Mm.
write.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that with us with us today, and thank you for writing this book. Um, I think I think another question that crops up in the course of reading this book is, naturally you're focusing specifically on classrooms and children's experiences in those classrooms, right? And I guess I was wondering why why you thought it was a good idea to use classrooms as the portal through which to understand the Islamophobia in our societies, because it's by no way only about those classrooms, right? Because you are reflecting on broader issues, but classrooms become your entry point. So why that?
When I had my child in 2014, um, uh, this was not actually the book I set out to write. The book I wanted to write was how about mothering a Muslim is the same as mothering any other religion, and it was actually supposed to be a book that talked about similarities and experiences. But when I went and spoke to so many families, it was just not possible to
Mhm.
write any other book but the book that it became. The reason we had to look at classrooms was that so when I started talking to these families, and I would sit for hours with them, and slowly such first one parent told me, by the way, this happened in my class, in my child's class. I thought, it's like one-off incident, so it's okay, go
Mhm.
get out of it.
Yeah.
You don't have to like highlight on that. Second parent tells me, I'm like, okay, maybe. Third, fourth, fifth. So only after the 10th case did I actually start asking this question, that if your child has been through bullied on religious grounds in your class, in the classroom or playground. So and the answers were overwhelming. I mean, 80% of my respondents said yes, and shared heartbreaking stories. And it starts as early as 5 and 6, as we heard. But the reason it was also important to do classrooms was to show, and the kind of schools that I have picked up, middle class, upper middle class, is to show how we fused in our experiences. So there was a lot of talk around the time when I was writing the book on how this is the fringe that's acting in such a way. How it is not us. It's like uh, just the fringe who lynches, or fringe who discriminates, or it's really not us. It's really not the educated elite and all that. But it was important to put the spotlight here on such classrooms and schools and playgrounds and families, to show that it is really not the fringe. It is us. It is you, me, our children, our homes, our drawing rooms, our classrooms, where such conversations are on the rise. And remember, this book was written in 2017-18. the world has changed since then. We have
Yeah.
come a very long way since then too. So this is a bit of the sequel of this, honestly speaking, today.
Yeah.
Uh, and another reason I felt was, as adults, I feel we are really letting down the next generation. I, I remember I was having this conversation with an Australian MP, and I cannot forget her words where she said that we need to be responsible ancestors because we are going to be ancestors for the next generations to come, and they will judge us and our every move that we make today.
Mhm.
And so, as responsible ancestors, are we really hand holding our young today in the way they need to be, or are we really feeling our young? Because let me give you an example. Okay, I'm again reading. Um, a major terrorist attack had occurred the night before. Saad, a 10-year-old, he was then in class 5 in a school in on the Noida Greater Noida Expressway. In his classroom, the newspaper was lying on the teacher's desk as the students waited for their English class to start. The teacher walked in, picked up the newspaper, and read aloud the headlines about the attack to the class. "What is happening in the world?" she exclaimed with a sigh as she sat down. Suddenly, one of the students called out Saad's name loudly. "Saad, ये क्या कर दिया तूने?" There was silence in the class. The words stuck in Saad's throat. He felt all eyes on him, waiting for him to say something. He was hot and angry, but he couldn't find the words to retaliate. The question settled uncomfortably in the classroom, filling the air with tension. Through the incident, the teacher did not bother to look up. I kept waiting for my teacher to react and scold the classmate, but she didn't react. She kept sitting there in front of us without saying a word. After a while, she stood up and began the class. I was silent. I didn't respond and kept sitting there. I didn't really know what to do, says the 10-year-old Saad to me. And
Yeah.
these are not the stories. These are stories. These are people I've sat down with, people who I've cried with, people I have held hands with, and it's heartbreaking to know that as adults we are conveniently looking away, or as a country, I feel that a lot of times we are uncomfortable taking on questions or taking on issues or addressing issues that need to be spoken about. Be it homophobia, be it Islamophobia, be it anything. It's very easy to brush it under the carpet, but today I really feel that silence is complicity.
Hmm.
Silence is complicity with everything that's going on wrong, and it's very important to stand up, address, and 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 to put yourself into the shoes of the other side and to find empathy in the way you address this. Uh, in a world that's increasingly getting difficult with every day, we are all sitting under lockdowns.
Hmm.
Uh, Increasing tensions. You throw in racism and you throw in Islamophobia, and it's a mixture that's waiting to explode. So we'll talk more about that later, I guess.
Yeah. Thank you also for bringing up that incident with um, that child who was blamed for extremist violence happening elsewhere in the world, and the teacher had no idea how to respond to that. And kids as young as this one are having such experiences. I was wondering, what are some of the ways in which these children might internalize that hatred and themselves learn to hate Muslims without realizing that that becomes a form of self-hate.
Uh, True. So, well, I'm not a psychologist, so I will not. I'll refrain from making any wide observations on that. What I can do is share stories around
Mhm.
stories that shed light on how this is being internalized. So, in fact, the very first story that the book starts with, Azania. By the way, all names in the book have been changed. So now, okay, let me just read this
Yeah.
because it's supposed to be a book reading. Okay, chapter one. Okay, okay, chapter one. The Muslims are coming. I don't know if you're seeing that the inverted way. Her terrified scream echoed shrilly in the closed space of the car. They were everywhere, the mass of white-clad bodies. They had surrounded the car from all sides. Most of the faces had long beards and black marks on their foreheads. She had spent many nights imagining the haunts that grew up on that spot. He had finally found her too. She felt panic grip her heart, squeezing it tight. Her skin broke into goosebumps. Her short hair was sticky with sweat. She ducked under the back seat of the car and uttered the words that were choking her throat. The Muslims are coming, they will kill us. Arshia Shah and Haris Alvi turned around in surprise to look at their 5-year-old daughter Azania and couldn't hold back their laughter. Azania had just started school in Delhi and she knew she was an Indian, but not that she was a Muslim. She knew of Allah, but that not only Muslims believe in Allah. What is a good age to tell a child that she belongs to a particular religion? When does a child begin to associate the sound of a name with a particular religion? These were not questions Arshia and Haris had asked of themselves. Little did they know that inside a hatchback on the road, a terrified 5-year-old would start screaming that the Muslims are coming. Azania's parents' first reaction had been amusement at the irony of a Muslim child cowering in fear of Muslims. How do you tell a 5-year-old that she is what she fears? It's
Wow.
a difficult
That's, yeah.
question to answer. It's a difficult question to answer because, it's not the incessant, the continuous, the all-consuming way Islamophobia is spread through news today, and not today, since the last 6 years, constantly on all sorts of mediums and all sorts of not just television news, not just print medium, but there is social media, there's WhatsApp, there is there's so many ways that you cannot gatekeep anymore. That and one prime focus of most news is hatred against Muslims and how Muslims are just this community that is all black. So this incessant news, and as a parent, when you cannot gatekeep, it's impossible to gatekeep today. It's in the air around you. So you don't know how a child is going to internalize it and understand it in their own context. So while we look at news in a way that is, we bring our own context, our own growing up experiences to when we internalize that news. But for a child, there is no other context. There is only what is being told. So and as I said mentioned earlier, we do not want to have those conversations with 5-year-olds or 6-year-olds or 10-year-olds because we think they're too young. Unfortunately, it's very important to address it because because you because it's not just the other out there. It's the other is all around us. It can be within us. So for another example, I remember during Padmavat, the movie that had come, a mother of a 7-year-old had gone to the movie to watch that movie, and when Khilji Ranveer Singh comes on stage, and that wild dance he does as Khilji, the child turns to his mother and says that, is this person a Muslim? Mother was like, what? Why? And she says, no, he looks like a Muslim because he's so violent. And the child is a Muslim who asked this question. So, so yeah, how is it being internalized? I'll leave it up.
Sorry, one second, Nazia, just hold on. Yeah, sorry, we didn't catch the last bit of what you said. Could you just repeat that? It
So,
seems to have been internalized.
yeah, so we, I mean, I'll leave it up to psychologists to give a more uh, psychoanalytical framework of how this is being analyzed. So I'll just leave up the stories up for all my audience to understand that it's not just a child who beats up the child next to him for being a Muslim. It could be a Muslim child who starts wondering what is all this about. And as parents, it puts us in a very difficult position because I keep saying this, that hate does not look at religion while swallowing up our kids. It will not differentiate between a Hindu kid or a Muslim kid or a Sikh kid or a Christian kid or any other kid. It will equally just affect all of them, and our kids are going to be the collateral damage of the hatred, of the discrimination, of the stigma, of the of the all-consuming nature of this otherization that we are facing in all around the world, but also specifically in India, more so in India.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And yeah, like you said, the theme of anxiety born out of the inability to keep your child 100% safe beyond a certain age is a very significant theme in your book. And yet something else that you talk about in the book is the problem of underreporting, right? While there is obviously all this concern among parents, for some reason, the cases are just not reported as much to the school authorities, right? And that gets worse as the child gets older. So why do you think that might be the case?
So before we published the book, I had actually sent out a letter to all the schools being mentioned in the book, saying that if asking them if they have also seen similar cases being reported in their schools and what action has been taken if it has been taken. Very few schools got back to me, so it was either a complete cold stonewalling that I faced or a complete open welcome where, for example, like the principal of DPS program, Gurgaon, who called me up herself, and the principal called me up and said that, you know what, I am the biggest bully in my school, and I cannot believe this is happening underneath my nose and behind my back. I cannot believe that. So I loved her for what she said, but and then she tells me how she has put in so many measures in place to check such things like getting old students to come in and talk at times to younger kids, or to have this honesty line that she has in her classroom, where if you go and stand on an honesty line, you can go and say anything, and you will not be reprimanded for it. So in spite of all these measures, this did not come under her radar, and we have many incidents from that school in this book. So how is it happening? Why is it happening? Why do we not know? I have uh, I as before becoming a mother, I used so-called liberal circles that you move around. I had never heard of such things being talked about. So the reason this book became what it became was one of the first books to call out the kind of Islamophobia that's happening. Since 2018, we have had so many other widely reported cases, but this became the first uh, analysis of this. Uh, I guess it happened because, as I said, when I started talking to these parents for a completely different set of questions, but kind of it was hours long conversations that would at some point with the parent, after having put some kind of faith in me, and we being on some kind of a platform where we felt a shared experience and shared conversations happening, is when the parent would open up and talk about this. uh, the spiral of silence, as they call it, because a lot of times the moment you question, the moment you voice out such things, and I've been facing that since like so many years now, since the book came, is that you're playing a Muslim card, you're playing a victim card, you're playing so I mean, God knows how many cards that we have. The backlash that we face is often something that is you don't want to be on that spotlight. A lot of people don't want to be in that. Your child is already going through this, and you don't want him to be extra ostracized in school for like, oh, the parents are creating trouble. You don't want to be the troublemakers at times, or you think that maybe it's just me because nobody else is talking about it, right? I had not heard about it. You had not heard about it. So maybe it's just happened to my child. So you think only it's your child, and that's why you don't go and talk about it. But then it's only when you put all these stories together you realize there's a pattern, there's a trend. So and that trend is always on an upward rise ever since. So I mean, at that point it was these stories, but ever since, almost every single day, it's been 2018, 19, 23, almost 3 years since, 2.5 years since the book came. There has not been a single day when I've not been reached out on some platform or the other on social media with a new story of of Islamophobia or discrimination. Did I answer your question? Is there anybody there?
Hello? Yeah, can
Yeah.
you hear me? Yeah.
Did I
So
answer your
yeah, the question was about underreporting. Um,
It's a spiral of silence.
yeah,
I've not heard anybody else say it. Maybe it's just me, and it keeps happening.
yeah, yeah, and obviously as kids get older, they want to handle it themselves, right? And
So when we don't address it with a 5 or 6 year old, thinking, okay, that child said something like this to a Muslim kid, but he's not a child. He's 5 years old. He cannot possibly
Mhm.
understand what is hatred. So it will just go away with age. It does not. It, in fact, the bully, the one who's been bullied, thinks that maybe there's something wrong with me, that nobody addressed this. And after a few such incidents, the child starts deciding, starts developing his own way of handling this. The one who is bullying, thinks that the bullier thinks that he can get away with this. Hey, nobody said anything. Maybe it's the right thing to do. So he starts doing it. So over time, in fact, the same child, a lot of cases where the same person bullies in different ways. So first of all, Osama, that was being used. Then there was Baghdadi, that was being used.
Yeah.
Now very recently it was Mullah that was being used. It really depends on what's in news, and that's how the bullying is done. uh, Bullying always happens, is very common. It's not like it's only this bullying that's happening. You can be bullied for the color of your skin. You can be bullied for the way you speak, for how cool and uncool you are, for caste, for so many ways. Bullying happens, is a reality of growing up, but this becomes very toxic, because for the simple reason that a lot of children, I mean, when you are given the responsibility of a whole community of terrorism, of killing people, when you are less than 10, it has a very different implication
Mhm.
inside of you, the way you internalize this. So many kids told me that, I'll fight it out myself. Who do they think they are for calling me a terrorist? I'll show them what a terrorist is. So, especially with boys, it becomes very, as they grow up, it becomes, there's a lot of physical angle to the bullying. They want to
Mhm.
fight it out. I'll show them. So, yeah.
Yeah. And what are the sort of what is so before I move on to my next question, I just want to let everyone know at this point you should feel free to start sending me your questions. Just use the chat on the right hand side. Yeah, okay. So my question, since you brought up, especially with boys, they tend to resort to physical violence as a means to resolve their issues. Um, I was wondering, what is the sort of the gender compounding that happens in matters like this? How are perhaps girls met with a combination of both Islamophobia and misogyny, right? So what is the unique form of bullying that happens there?
Yeah, I'm just looking for that place where I talk about Islamophobia and misogyny. Um, it's, as you said, it gets compounded with girls, because a lot of time girls learn, like, you're not supposed to respond back, and things like, we've heard so many cases where, you know, as they grow up, there is a lot of between the lines where, like, you're wearing a skirt. Doesn't your father from the Taliban have objection to it? Or will you, if he says something, will your father bomb me or kill me? Or, it gets compounded in weird ways, that that are often very difficult for the girls to reply back in a way. I mean, we are not we do not train our children to reply back to such responses, right? I mean, how do you, as a parent, how do you address this? How do you, people ask me like, how are you doing this? So how do you, how the parent do I handle this? So I say I still haven't found an answer to that, but like small things that I did. To give an example, so my little one is just turned 6, and we were looking at the map of India, and talking about the map of the world, and I was just showing her who our neighbors are. So I showed her that how we have Nepal at the top, and anybody from Nepal is a Nepali. So we have China, then they have Chinese. You have a Bangladesh, it's a Bangladeshi. You have a Sri Lanka, it's a Sri Lankan. And you have a Pakistan, so you have a Pakistani. Then I told her that if somebody calls you Chinese, what would you do? You'd laugh and say, I'm an Indian, right? And if somebody calls you Nepali, you'll do the same. For a Sri Lankan, you'll do the same, and so will you do for a Pakistani. So that was my way
Mm.
of of uh, of getting her to be prepared to be called a Pakistani, uh, without laying emphasis on the fact that this is the country you'll be called out for, uh, because she's just 6 right now, and I mean, there is no right and wrong way to talk about this. I feel always a wrong way to talk about this. Why do we need?
Right.
I keep asking, why do I need to talk to my child about this? I don't want to be that mother who needs to
Right.
talk about this, and that is the world that I want to be in. But unfortunately, that is not the world we are in, and we have to improvise on ways on how to ask our young kids or young boys or our young girls on how to handle so much hate, so much hate
Yeah.
out there. And it's not, I'm not laying blames here. It's
Mm.
not about these schools. These, I've put, at the end of the book, there is the list of those 20, 21 schools where I had done the research, but it's not about these schools. It's very important to underline the fact that this is beyond this particular these particular cities or these particular schools. It's all consuming. It's all across.
Mm.
And the reason that we need to understand this is that we need to be prepared. We need to handle it, and not think of it as something that happens only on your television screens. Unfortunately, what the kids are only doing is that they're repeating the 9 p.m. bulletins in the 10 a.m. classroom. That is all that they're doing.
Mm. So we've started getting questions from some of our participants. I'm going to read them out. So there's a question from Shahina. She says, I wanted to ask, in today's scenario where normal Muslims are made accountable and answerable for propaganda on TV or online, how can we remain sane? I face discrimination in work and within friend circle where behaviors have become polarized. Thank you for that, Shahina.
Tough one, Shahina, and I send you warm hugs first of all. It's not an easy time to be in. It gets more difficult with every passing day, with every passing incident, with every passing news broadcast. It's not just schools, it's workplaces, as you said, it's friends, it's, in my dedication, I'm not going to cry. In my dedication, towards the end, when I write my acknowledgements, I started with, to the friends we have lost over the past few years, you made the hurt closer to home. It is a difficult time to be in. How do you stay sane? By talking about it. I feel, people ask me, why did you need to write this down? The reason to write this down was to show that there is a shared set of experiences that we can borrow from, we can learn from, and we can go ahead from walk. Uh, the moment you stop having conversations is when you stop finding solutions. So it's very important for conversations to happen. To It's not easy for conversations to happen because the timeline that we might be seeing on a social media would be extremely different from the timeline that our friends sees, and there are so many sources of news. there's so many sources of fake news. There's so many words to call for news nowadays that it's difficult to keep track anymore of who is really really believing what is happening in the world. Uh, so it's so I was trying to talk about this later, but I remember a few months back I was invited to a residential school, one of the top 10 residential schools, and they had invited some 30 other schools. And One second.
Yes.
So one of the residential schools had invited 30 other schools and asked them to read the book and be in conversation with me. So, and I get goosebumps every time I talk about this story. So it was evening, and there were like 15 to 16-year-olds sitting on a podium with spotlight on them, mics in their hand, and in front of them they had all the teachers and their peers, some 100 audience members sitting there. And I start the conversation by asking them for their reactions to the book. And it was a difficult question for me because what if even one of those 15 to 16-year-olds would say that, this is not happening. There's a bunch of lies. I, as an adult, cannot go there and say that I have done the research. I know better. I couldn't do that. And I was still not prepared on how to answer that. But I went in with keeping faith in God. And all those 30 students said great stuff about the book. But one child, I still remember his face. He was holding on to the mic as if his life depended on it. And he says that I'm ashamed to admit, but I am the bully in the book. I'm ashamed to admit, but I am the bully in the book. And I realized that only after having read the stories. And I was able to put myself into the shoes of the other side and realize the impact of my own words. I hope that answers your question, Shahina, because it's really about being able to reach out and to put yourself in that. It's not easy to put to share your inhibitions, to share how you're feeling, to share the fact that it's affecting your sanity. It's not easy to do that. It's not easy to open up, but I think it's very important to open up because a lot of people, I go to a friend's party and they make comments like, my landlord is a Muslim and he came in with his two wives to check our house. I'm like, do you know the two wives? So she's like, there were two women who were wearing a burqa. So I'm like, it could be two totally unrelated women. It could be, a mother and a wife, or a wife and a sister, or a wife and some other relative. But there were two wives. So she's like, he was a Muslim. He must be having two wives. So it's just the problem is that today prejudices, stereotypes have become facts for a lot of people. Because they have been repeated on an endless note in different ways with different issues, that it's for a lot of people it's just difficult to segregate the two. So for us, while I completely agree that the onus is not on the Muslim community to go forward and to start clarifying doubts. It's not, definitely not. Onus is on both sides to reach out, and but someone somewhere has to make that move.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. We have quite a few questions coming in. So let's take Abhi's next. So he says, children are bullied. Sorry. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah. So Abhi says, children are bullied for being Sindhi, Marwadi, fat, dark, all the time. 100% of children are bullied. That seems to be a part of growing up, right? So what is it about, I guess, being bullied as a Muslim? I think that's what his question is. What is it about being bullied as a Muslim that is unique, or why did you feel like that conversation was necessary at this point in time?
Right. I think I answered that question earlier when we were talking about this, that how bullying happens for various reasons, for the color of your skin, for how
Yeah.
cool and cool you are, for the language you speak, for the caste you come from, for so many reasons. That's a part of growing up. But when the owners of a whole community and their actions are put on you selectively, when you are made responsible for the deaths of so many people in a bomb blast, or or for something else. I mean, when we have a, I don't want to get into what about free, but there are so many incidences across the world where people are called lone wolf or a single shooter, but not termed as a terrorist. It's and I remember this child who had actually sat down and made a list of all the times every Muslims had
Mm.
condemned different wrong actions around the world, so that she could just show to her friends that, look, I'm not answerable to all of them, but my community has been calling it out. So that's the fact that you can be made responsible for something very gruesome and something very wrong, and the child internalizes that in a very different way from the way that, I mean,
Yeah.
all kinds of bullying is wrong, all kinds of bullying is wrong, but it's very important to understand how Islamophobia reacts in a different way. And especially as a mother, when I keep saying that I cannot keep information anymore, I don't, my nana, to whom I have my maternal grandparent, to whom I had dedicated the book also. He was a man of the 70s. He wore a kurta pajama. He had that namaz ka nishan. He had that long white beard, and but he was a man of the 70s, and the ideas of the 70s reached out to him.
Mm.
I really don't know what ideas are reaching out to my child through a dark web. I remember this mother telling me that her child was physically bullied in school for being a Muslim.
Yeah.
Then goes on, he starts playing these Xbox games, which are very violent. Then he starts bringing only Muslim friends over because in his class, if you read the book on what's happening in Bhopal, on how classes are segregated by religion. So he starts bringing only Muslim friends over. Then over time, he gets on WhatsApp and he gets both kinds of forwards, right? He gets a forward where an ISIS is beheading somebody else, or a Muslim who's being lynched in India. So he gets all kinds of stories and all kinds of forwards and all kinds of information, and you don't know, when you're pushed into a corner for your identity, what kind of ideas would reach out to you and who would be able to influence you. Because as a parent, my influence ends today at a point.
Right.
Uh, we live in the world of information technology, and it's crazy what's happening out there. So as a parent, I need to be
Yeah.
more careful today.
Yeah. Okay, so we've gotten quite a few questions and we have about 10-ish minutes to go. So what we're going to do is, since some of them are similar, I'm going to read them out in a cluster and maybe just summarize what the question is then at the end of it, and then you can answer those together. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay, so Mukarram's question is, what can we do as responsible citizens to spread love and respect for religion among kids, for all religions among kids? And Mariam had a similar question. What skills can I develop in children to ensure he is responsible enough to understand this? Also, Shanya had sent in a message. So she says, thank you for writing an incredibly challenging book, Nazia, and for highlighting this. I was a teacher in a low-income school with majority Muslim kids, and I constantly worried about the obstacles they would face on account of their religion. And as a teacher, I never knew how to fully tackle this fear that I had for them. Through your conversations, were you able to draw up any directives for educators who should know how to identify and deal with such bullying in the classroom? So I think one part of the question is in general about how can we raise our children and what skills can we teach them to better understand this issue and to just foster a love for all communities. And I think the second question is more specifically about what can educators do to deal with such issues in the classroom.
Okay. Um, I'll take the second question first and the first question second.
Yeah.
So, for what educators can do, there is an appendix in the book that talks about what can we do in schools. It's a list of things that I have suggested, an action point of around 10 actions. I mean, they are not like, I wouldn't say that this is the only thing you can do. It's a dynamic list. It's a growing list. So I'm happy to get on another call and talk more about this. But yeah, for starters, there's a list of 10 pointers what schools can do and what educators can do. Um, and to answer the first question in terms of what as parents we can do, I said this before, I haven't found the answer. There is no one answer, but something that I did. I remember around in 2000, 3 years back. Yeah, 3 years back, I had put in a Facebook post saying that if you have not been to an iftar during Ramzan, if you're not been to a iftar or a Muslim household, I'm happy to invite you over to an iftar at my place. Um, you know, this Facebook post, the background was that the book had gone into editing at that point, and so I was free that month. And there was also the CSDS study that said that only 33% of Hindus consider a Muslim among their close friends. This was a 2017 study. So I found that number very low, 33% only, who have a Muslim as a close friend. That means only those Hindus must have gone to a Muslim household and had a meal with them. Because in my class, I was the only Muslim. Must have made friends with what, 5, 6 kids who must have come over to my house over the period of time. What about the rest who were 30, 35 kids in my class who might have had another Muslim friend in their neighborhood, but maybe not. So it's easy to fall for prejudices and stereotypes when you have not experienced it. So that was the reason to put out the Facebook post saying that I'm
Mm.
happy to. And I had 90 comments on that Facebook post. I live in a small flat. Ouch. So I was like, I have, openly put out this invitation. I better stand it through. And I didn't know what to do. Then somebody on that same post said that, do you need help? I live in a bungalow. I can accommodate 100. I have a venue. Somebody said that, you know what, 100 people, I think you need help. I'm happy to bring the samosas. Somebody said, I'm happy to bring the biryani. Somebody said, I'm happy to bring the kebab. Somebody said, I'm happy to bring the chole. And by the end of 1 week, we had 10 women who had come forward, happy to co-host this. And, uh, and we had 100 people whom we did not really know personally. It was all through social media. And I remember the first time everybody was sitting as if, you don't know anybody, you don't know what house you have come to. And we started this introductions, like, let's first talk about who we are. And somebody said that, oh, I see there are no swords on the walls of a Muslim house. And I'm like, okay, here we go. So by the end of the evening, in fact, we were all hugging and we were like talking about, and there were so many stereotypes that were dispelled in one evening. From the kind of women that Muslims are. So, at that point, there was also the triple talaq debate was like fire raging through India, as if that's the only important issue that India needs to talk about. And how they were like, oh, Muslim women can be so articulate. Oh, they can be a woman. So out of these 10, there was a Muslim woman who was a pilot. There was a historian, there was a blogger, there was a home chef, there was an entrepreneur, there was a biker, there was a journalist. So they were like all shades and all kinds of Muslim women out there. And we were like, yeah, they were like, just like any other community, we are like very diverse. If you go beyond the stereotypes that are shown on your television. And then they were like, oh, you have vegetarian food. We're like, yeah, duh. So, and oh, you can, is there like any particular kind of clothes that we need to wear? Or I'm like, just come as you are. So it was very important to do this because it was at the end of the evening is when we realized why it was important. And we realized that people just don't know enough beyond what is shown on TV or on social media or on WhatsApp. And since the last 3 years, this has become an organic movement. So it has some 6 cities, many women, hundreds of women who have come together to do this, to open their doors during Ramzan, open their houses to strangers, cook for them with a lot of love, and to just let them experience this diversity within us. Um, and we have done it in all kinds of houses and all kinds of places, from Purani Delhi to South Delhi to Bombay to Hyderabad to Guwahati to so it's been one amazing experience, amazing collective coming together. And our takeaway was just one, that just answer with love. Uh, Unfortunately, it's very difficult to do that today. Every year we question ourselves: do we still have the resilience and the energy and the love left to do this? But we still go ahead and we still do this for the simple reason that it's more important as the day goes. It's more important for people to be able to reach out with empathy, to see us as part of the humanity around us, to be part of the society and to part of the community around us. And that is one way that, and it's a beautiful way for kids to grow up. It's not just Ramzan now that's become, and all our guests now start inviting us for different festivals. We do Teej, we do Diwali, we do Christmas, we do all kinds of events, and we have, and like for the kids, it's a beautiful way to grow up. So
Yeah.
I hope all of India can come together and do this, because it's very important to reclaim our diversity. Give it any other name you want, but it's important to reclaim, because I keep saying this, that
Yeah.
kids today are the collateral damage of hate politics, and hate will just follow them up irrespective of who they are. So
Yeah.
hope we all can be together in this.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So we are in all likelihood going to run a few minutes over time till maybe about 12:40 because we've got about two, three more important questions. Is that okay?
Sorry,
Sorry,
I have
Nazia, is
like
that okay?
battery left, 5% battery left.
I do you think it'll last? Okay. Well, I mean, okay, so we're gonna try to speed it up a little bit, but I mean it's almost 12:30 already, so we will be a few minutes over time. But it's only about two, three more questions. I don't think it should take too long. There's a question from Shireen. She says, "Hi Nazia, I work on caste among Muslims and had a question about the people who were interviewed. You mentioned several times that these are elite and posh schools, and people interviewed are upper middle class or from elite families. Are these also mostly upper caste Muslim families as well? That is, either Sayyid, Sheikhs, Pathans, or Mughals? I noticed castes of these families been indirectly referred to, as in reference to the surname Khan in Azania's story, or in reference to aristocratic families. I ask this because I'm trying to work on whether Muslims from different castes face different kinds of discrimination." Right.
Right. One incident I remember that was told to me was that if you come from a not so well-to-do family, so you're like, from an EVS family, so there are many schools have this EVS category where economically weaker sections come and be part of these sport schools. So, and they being referred to as Bangladeshi, while a family from a better income would be called a Pakistani. So it's a small they pick up on such nuances too. So I'm happy to on a more private conversation share with you the entire, because most of the names and everything is changed in the book. So I'm happy to share with you the findings in a more private conversation. I'm happy to do that.
Yeah.
And to help you more on that.
Right. Um, so let's now go to, so sorry for not asking this question sooner. I seem to have missed it. Nitin says, as someone who's grown up in an upper caste Hindu household, how do you deal with your own Islamophobic parents and not get mad during this time?
Oh, Nitin, sending you a lot of resilience and a lot of it's not easy. It's not easy. I agree with you. And I'm not in your shoes, so I would not presume to know the answer to that. But I can understand it's not easy. I can understand that to say, tell your own parents that it's wrong. I remember, again, going back to that story I shared about the 30 schools that had come together. I remember another child saying this, that, a lot of these stories ring true to me, because my own grandparents or my own parents tell me to stay away from Muslims, not share their tiffins, or not to
Mm,
go to the house. So it's it's there. And it's not like it's something new. It's traditionally been there in India. It's just that it's now spurting out because it's given validation through
mm,
constant barrage of media around us. But it's not easy, but it's important. It's important, and I think somewhere that to share, they are also victims of their own experience, right? They have probably not again being on the end where they have experienced a Muslim household or a Muslim family or a Muslim friend. So and fear is what is driving us. So how can we respond to fear without compromising on our humanity? without compromising on what needs to be done as a community. So
Mhm.
maybe talking to them through sharing experiences or sharing, it cannot be a one day thing, it has to be over time. Their their own response is something that has happened over time through their own experiences in life. So you cannot expect them to change in a day or two.
Yeah,
Breaking with your family is not the idea too. So it takes resilience, it takes time, but do it by talking about real people and away from what we see on media.
yeah, great. So, sorry.
And give them my book.
Yes. Well, Mukarram says, congratulations, Nazia, for such a wonderful book. And maybe we can take the last two questions together. Does that
Right.
sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. So, sorry, I'm just scrolling up. So, Lasya has a question. Hi, Nazia. I've never witnessed any religion based bullying when I was in school in Hyderabad in the first half of the 2000s. And I never witnessed it at international educational institutions when I went later. However, I did witness a lot of polarization in my own house. Do you think in the past few years the polarization and bullying has moved into public domains more and more? Is there something about this that you discovered during your research? So that's one question. Sorry?
Can you repeat that last part? Post
Yeah, so,
2000?
so yeah, so the question is that in the 2000s,
Did not
both as
witness, but
yes, yeah.
I
However, yeah, there was increasing polarization within her own house. So, do you think it's maybe moved into the public domain more over time? And the second question is from one second from
Um,
Dharmesh. Yeah, sorry, Neerath.
no, I was just gonna say the Hermesh. Go ahead, Manju.
Yeah. So this is the last question. It's from Dharmesh. Have you come across LGBTQ plus Muslim children who are bullied in schools on both accounts of their identity? If so, how have conversations been with them and their parents? Yeah.
yeah. I'm sorry, I wouldn't be able to answer the last part for the lack of research on that, the LGBTQ. I am in touch with a bit in touch with the community, the Muslim LGBTQ community, but I would not want to, as I said, I've not done research on that, and I don't want to, take away from their own experience. I think we can have a different chat with them. I'm happy to host it if nobody else does, with people from the community and get them to respond to your question because they'll be better placed. Um, uh, the other question, has it become more in the recent past?
More public, yeah.
I have said this, I think, too many times during this conversation that it's been really the media that has driven in the last 6, 7 years whose sole agenda of spreading hate around the community and painting them only as black and nothing else has really contributed to this. But one telling example from the book was this girl who was in class 12 when 2014 happened, and this is if elections the first time India saw such a huge mandate being given after a long time at least. Uh, so she tells me how overnight her class changed, and she talked about these are the same children that she had grown up with since kindergarten, and in 2014 in class 12 suddenly they changed. And they how teachers would talk about that there is only one person who can lead India, and she would be the only one who would raise her hand, says that what about 2002, and everybody would turn to look at her as if like, is that even a question? And she'll realize that she's the only person who had a problem with 2002 and nobody else did.
Mm,
So, and how such things, and many other small incidents, if you read through the book, Chachi, and it's not like one big thing that needs to happen. It's usually the smaller things that come together to form people, to make people feel other. And she says that there was a point where she wanted to wear the hijab, and she comes from a family that traditionally does not even offer namaz every day, or is not very
mhm.
religious to say so. So she said that she wanted to wear the hijab for the simple reason that she felt that at least she'll get accepted somewhere. She said that no matter how cosmopolitan we think we are, to quote her, how cosmopolitan we think we are, at the end of the day, we are divided on communal lines, and they will never accept me. So I'm as so my maybe my community will, and so maybe I should start wearing the hijab. So for a young 18-year-old, right, class 12, 18-year-old, to start thinking on these lines and to have no background or no family conversation around this and just being influenced by people around her, it's and we're not talking about some school. We're talking about another South Delhi school that's known for its values. In fact, quite a respected school. So it's uh, it's really you can see a lot of people have mentioned this before. They've seen people change around them. So
Mm.
yes, it is driven in the last few years through propaganda, which is clearly now the pattern of the propaganda clearly shows us how it's done with a foresight into where this is going to go, and and it just makes it even more difficult in today's time with the pandemic there and people fighting for their lives and fighting to keep their home loved ones secure. And such propaganda can really, really tear the country apart. We have already seen incidents on the rise on discrimination based on religion, from access to health services to access to relief material. And this will only rise as panic rises. Research has shown that it is the more troubled the times are, the more uncertain the times are, the more people are prone to take up such divisive agendas because uh, I mean, panic, fear does not know reason. So it's very important today to fight as one because the virus knows no religion, and to stigmatize any community for anything because they themselves are victims of the virus or patients, and it's fighting this as with stigma and discrimination is really not the answer, and really, and that is something that's very unique to India. It's not happening anywhere else. So yeah.
Yeah, great. Let me just, conclude by asking you how the book has been received. What has been the general response to the book? Hopefully, some of them have been encouraging.
Yes, I think it's been very encouraging. In fact, the fact that 2.5 years later it's become even more relevant. I mean, because it's. I mean, people ask me when's the next book due, and I keep saying I need to first get over the first one. It still
Mm.
feels as if it's just been released. The fact that, as I shared earlier, there's so many stories that people have reached out, and schools have said they have laid down anti-religious bullying um, ideas into the and train the teachers on this,
Mm.
or they have or parents who were very very people have wanted to almost unfriend on social media had later reached out and said that I read your book and I want my children to read that.
Mm.
So it has in a space where we have felt friends being torn apart because of disagreement. This has been an experience that has also mended many relationships.
Mm.
So I'm very happy that I could be a medium for such stories, for such experiences. These are not my stories. These are what I keep calling it, a collective memoir of Muslim motherhood in India. So I'm very, very thankful to all the people who have spoken to me, and I just hope that we can be all together in this,
Yeah,
and uh, and be more responsible ancestors for the generations ahead.
yeah. That's a great note to end on. Thank you so much for making the time to have this
Thank
conversation with
you,
us.
Belongg, and to you, to Neerath, for have putting this together, and more power to all of you.
Yeah. And just to all of the participants, thank you for joining us for this conversation. Feel free to share your feedback on this session or any of our other sessions with me on contact@belong.net or manjari@belong.net. Neerath, is there anything you would like to add?
Nothing. Thanks, Nazia. Thanks very much for doing this. And thank you, everyone, for attending. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. See you
Stay,
guys.
stay
Bye.
sane. Bye.